So this is a much larger piece that people would recognize from Battlestar Galactica, the original television series.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me about this?
This was designed by Davy Jones, and it was a great designer. This was done at the Heartland facility that Universal did decide to build and supply special effects for different features and TV series and so on. So that was an amazing miniature. It was 8 or 9 feet long, I think, but I can't be sure. It was so impressive that I can't be sure exactly what it was. But it was all fully detailed, and it had to appear in scenes where fighters were going to be going very close to it and be very tiny and battling to try and find a usual thing, kill the bad guy,
right?
And he's awfully big. So Davy had worked out a scheme where they built this in 2 halves. It was split between a top half and a bottom half.
So it had to seem like the Death Star.
In a sense, yes. But the difference between the two was that the light source for all the teeny lights of all the stuff on the Battlestar were going to be powered by 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 light sources inside the model, and then each half separately they were going to thread fiber optics from the surface, take them into the middle, and wrap them into a bundle and facing a light source. And in special effects, you have shooting going on for a long period. Having any number of small lights working means that some of them ain't going to do it.
Right.
And the trouble is, you don't know what order the scenes are going to be shot in.
Oh, for like consistency,
shot scene to scene. It's almost always the case that different ships aren't even built before their battle.
Whoever they're fighting.
Yes, exists. So it goes into that kind of thing. And the trouble is, if the shots are not consecutive, then patterns of these lights suddenly
you see them blinking
blink
on
out,
and off.
and then they come back.
Yeah. I've had Christmas trees like that.
Right. So they did this with fiber optics from the center, and it worked very well. It was awesome, even just in the studio and mounting it on the motion control tracks. It was an awesome miniature.
So is this a blueprint or is it an original?
No, it is a blueprint from when Davy had just finished the concept and was showing the concept around, and I was a definite fan, and so I got one copy.
Oh, great.
And have appreciated it. Remind me of the good old days.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't you tell me about this really large piece of artwork here?
Okay. This is a side effect from a very expensive failure. When Spielberg was starting Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there was a chance that computer graphics might be able to do the scenes with the all the alien spacecraft. And there was a company that had done military work and had done ray tracing, which was pretty tough computer-wise at that time. And so they needed a test of how the alien ships would work with their glowing light and so forth, which could either be done the old-fashioned way, and they knew what the outcome was, but they also knew what the tremendous expense was, because it was going to be very hard for this.
Right.
So I got the job of setting up a scene for this military type ray tracing software that we were programming on IBM punch cards. So you have a stack of cards that goes into a reader, and that's how the scene would have to be done on a computer that at that time was the most powerful that could do this kind of work, aside from the military. And the cooling for it at the facility was about 2.5 blocks long towers, one after another, of water cooler towers working at maximum to keep the computer from not frying while it was doing the computation. This was very primitive.
Yeah.
So I did a sketch of this and did the punch cards for the part where the ship would be hovering and coming down, and a host of little other alien thingers would be involved, and the heroes would be on the and the whole surround facility.
It's so small where you have these little figures down at the bottom.
Right. And this is Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And they fired up the computer on the run, and I had used a power of the software that had the way it was organized by the people who'd done these radiation studies was that you could layer things and have each layer independent in computation from the other layers. Whereas up till then, the problem was if you stacked a lot of layers, the first layer had to solve, and then that meant that it would do some, and then the second layer would have to do something in relation to it, and the third layer would have to do something more in relation to the other two, and it would get prohibitive.
Yeah,
very prohibitive. So they fired it up, and it was at a secure facility, and it started working. They could tell from what the feedback was from the computer, that it wasn't just repeating something, it wasn't caught in a loop. But they couldn't figure out, what is it doing? They started at dusk and computed all the way through the night, all the way through dawn, and it still wasn't doing something they could understand. And then finally it completed and produced one Polaroid image. And the Polaroid image showed that it did do what it was supposed to do, had UFOs and silhouette buildings so that the UFOs could coexist with them and so forth.
Right.
But it had a serious problem, and that was the first layer did not separate from the second layer and the third layer and the fourth layer and the fifth. They had produced the most expensive film since a camouflage study of a pine tree. And they called me into the office, showed me the Polaroid, and said, we have a compromise in mind. That is, you keep this secret for 3 years, and you don't tell anybody that we were doing this, and we won't charge you for any of the time for that frame, but you don't come back for 3 years. So then Spielberg called Doug Trumbull and said, we're not doing it that way. We're doing it the old-fashioned way with a smoke chamber and kerosene smoke and miniature, and it's going to, we know the quality that way will be the quality we need.
Yeah, so that's your Close Encounters.
That was the Close Encounters that only existed on this, and Stephen even said, don't show it to Doug. just let Doug work out his version.
So this is from Buck Rogers.
Yep.
And this is a diagram.
That's a field chart.
It's a field chart.
You're into a 4-field or what, etc.
So 24 millimeter lens. So what do the different boxes represent?
They are screens of particular size and shape. So when they're calling for a shot, designers will say, oh, this will start with a 4-field and then it'll pull out to a 12-field. And therefore the image that was originally in the shot will be much smaller and farther away. That's the nomenclature they use.
Got it.
The surprising thing about this was that it was a computer graphic. I borrowed it from a salesman who's a friend, an HP computer that was about like this, and learned on that for a weekend. And I
fast learner.
And I found I had to be, because I had to give it back on Monday, or I'd have to pay for it. And I had to find out how that kind of computation was done. So I had to go through the manual for that computer and thumb through until I saw something in the guidebook that looked like a matrix. Now, I had no idea what a matrix looked like, but it was a group of 3x3 or 3x4 numbers or 4x4 numbers, and that meant I had to study that part and learn to do that, and then make some spacecraft designs and a control panel that would let the designer position the physical model on the motion control panel and follow the track and the specifications that were being recorded on floppy to do the actual shot. The advantage on that was that 6 months later, when the fighter it was shooting at was finished and the problems with it had been solved and the length of the next scene had been solved and so forth, they could then run that same track and the motion control would then do the right things to interact with a ship that wasn't there when the shot was begun.
So why don't we look through a couple of these here?
Okay. That is the image that was produced by a plotter of the control, not the actual shooting of it, but that was the position at a particular part in the scene of that ship. And that ship is all just simulated with line drawings. Then the other ship, for instance, and those were then turned into continuous scenes by using this control panel.
Oh, wow.
On a plotter that was that size. That's what the only plotters they had at that time.
Wow.
And you could select different aspects of the motion, the control, and so on. You could set rotations with these and positions in space with those, and it would then trace on this, but on a visual screen, it would trace that, and you could reestablish and move a spaceship with your, was a puck that was the equivalent of a mouse. And you could then select one and move it or twist it, so on. And
Wow.
that was the first way of doing it.
This is like that earlier one then.